let's talk about all of the books that I read in March of 2024. I have kind of read my customary so far this year 6 books this month. One of them I did technically finish on the 1st of April. It's now the 2nd of April when I'm recording this, so technically finished it yesterday, which is not March. But I did read like 95% of the book in March, and it was on my March TBR, so I'm going to count it as being read in March. A little bit of a lie, but that's fine. We're going to go with it. So we're just going to jump in. I don't think there's anything more that I need to explain about what we're doing here. We're just looking at the books that I read. Here's a little sneak preview of the side of each of these books if you want to anticipate what is coming. Alright, first up, first book that I finished in March of 2024 was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I have been pretty slowly reading my way through the ACOTAR series. I did read this one very soon after Court of Mist and Fury, but I did end up picking this one up. It wasn't on my March TBR, but I did end up picking it up because I needed to read a book that was neither first nor last in a series for one of the reading challenges that I'm working through, and this was the first book that came to mind of that variety. None of the other books on my TBR fit into that category, so I picked this one up. It was a very big book. It was probably a mistake to pick this one up, but I started it in February and I finished this one on the 5th of March. This is just a continuation of Feyre's story. I don't want to talk too much about what it's about because that will be spoilers for the first 2 books in the series. But basically, Feyre is a human that was whisked away to the Fey realms and is now surviving, living, thriving in the Fey world and trying to figure out, life and stuff. This was a very enjoyable book. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's not quite as good as ACOMAF, I would say, but definitely still better than ACOTAR, which I only gave 3 stars. So still a very solid book. It is like a fantasy romance if you are not at all familiar with the series. But yeah, that was ACOWAR. I always forget the acronyms. ACOWAR by Sarah J. Maas, which I really enjoyed. Starting off my month strong with that one. Alright, next up we have The Secret Runners of New York by Matthew Riley. This was I pulled this one out as part of my TBR. What was the prompt for this one? Okay, so this book had the best opening sentence out of the books that I had and checked through when I did my TBR prompt jar video. I needed to read a book by an Australian author for one of my other reading challenges, so picking up a Matthew Riley book is always a good choice for me, being one of my favourite Australian authors. I own, I would say, almost all of his books and enjoy reading all of his books, but this was one that I got for Simon for Christmas that I hadn't read yet, so I was getting pretty keen to read through this one. I've done that now. I didn't love it. I think I gave it 3 stars. Yes, I gave this one 3 stars. It was fun, it was enjoyable, entertaining, but it wasn't anything spectacular. It's a young adult and it has some heavy romance plot lines to it, which is not my favorite from Matthew Riley. He has some romance in a lot of his books, but they're usually very, very side story stuff. Whereas this one was a little more prevalent. But basically we follow a teenager who has moved to New York to live with her mother. She joins a very highly prestigious private school and she's sort of the outsider, and there's a lot of secret society sort of stuff going on, a lot of mean girl cliques, that sort of thing, and some murders and disappearances. So we got some mystery. It's a little bit sci-fi. There's a little bit of sci-fi futuristic sort of stuff going on. It was fun. Nothing spectacular, but it was fun. Enjoyed it. And I finished that one on the 8th of March. Sorry, my laptop is on the bed behind the camera here. If I'm looking over in that direction at any point, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, the third book that I finished in March of 2024 was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This was a book that had multiple POVs from my March TBR prompts. I read Divine Rivals, I think in January of this year. I can never remember if I read it in January this year or December last year. Pretty sure it was January. It's pretty recently. I read the first book, and this book came out earlier this year, so I was pretty excited to finish off this duology. It was pretty good. It was solid. It was another 3 stars, so it wasn't amazing. I did rate Divine Rivals 4 stars, I think, so this was a lower rating to Divine Rivals. As I said, when I read Divine Rivals, I really enjoyed the newspaper writing, steampunk, 1920s, 30s sort of world that we were living in during the first part of the first book. And then they kind of took that away from me. So it's a little bit disappointed, and it did not make a comeback in this book. And yeah, it just wasn't quite as good as the first one, but still a very enjoyable read. We follow Iris and Roman. They are both writers, newspaper writers at the moment, journalists. That's the word I'm looking for. They were both journalists. And in this world, they have gone to war. The gods have gone to war. The gods have enlisted a bunch of people from their city. Iris's brother ends up enlisting in the war efforts and goes off to fight in the war. Iris starts typing him letters on her typewriter and magically sending them through her wardrobe. But of course, the letters are not actually going to her brother, they are going to Roman, and that is sort of the starting storyline of Divine Rivals. Ruthless Vows just continues that story on through the war that's happening, the relationships that are going on, both romantic and personal, and yeah, it was still a fun book. I'm glad that I finished off the duology and that I have the completed storyline of this, and it was good. And I finished that on the 15th of March. I don't know if anyone actually cares what dates I finished things, but there you go. Next up, we have a book that I don't actually have physically. This is a book that I borrowed from the library. It was also a bit of a surprise book. It didn't come out on my TBR. It was one of the Goodreads Award winners from last year, which I'm trying to read through all of the 2023 Goodreads winners. It was one of the winners from last year, and I had it sitting on my library hold list. I checked it on the Monday and I was 10th in line, so I was like, oh, I'll leave it a little bit longer before I suspend the hold. And then on Wednesday, the book was ready for me to collect. So I had to go pick it up from the library and I had to read it. And that book was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. If you guys saw my first TBR video, I think it was my February TBR, I pulled this book out of the Goodreads prompt jar, and I did not want to have to buy this book because I did not expect to enjoy this book. I really wanted this one to be one of the ones that I borrowed from the library, so I did end up putting it back and pulling out another prompt in February, but it has finally come up on my library holds. So I went to the library, picked it up, I read it, and I was so surprised. I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I was not expecting to enjoy it. It was a young adult romance. It follows, God, what is her name? We're following our main character Mallory, who is a 18-year-old girl, woman, whatever you call someone who is 18-year-olds. I still feel weird calling myself a woman, and I'm 30, so do with that information what you will. We follow Mallory, who has recently graduated from high school, but her mum is quite unwell and she can no longer work. So Mallory has to stick around and look after her family, her mother, her 2 young sisters, make some money so that they can all live and survive. And when she was quite young, she used to be really into chess, and she was very good at chess. She was a chess prodigy from a very young age. But she ended up quitting chess due to something that happened with her father, which they don't really explain until later on in the book, so I won't be spoiling any of that. But some things happen and she ends up getting back into the chess world. But she ends up going to a random chess tournament and she beats the current world champion at this random teeny tiny chess tournament. And so she's offered a fellowship, I believe it is, with a chess club who pay her to just basically learn to play chess and to go to tournaments and stuff, in which the tournaments she can also win money for winning. So quite a profitable endeavor for her, but she is still trying to pretend that she's not into chess. She's just doing this for the job. And so we sort of expand from there, and there's some relationship between her and the chess player that she beat. It's called a young adult romance book. There wasn't actually as much romance as I anticipated. Mallory, I think, was a fantastic character. She was this really very smart, person who obviously would have gone to college if it was an option that was open to her. But she, had to stick around to look after her family. She was working in a mechanics shop. She was a mechanic as like this female that was a really very smart, cool chess player that was a mechanic. There were other elements to her personality that I now can't remember, but I just thought she was a very good character. She was very unexpected, almost in a like predictable, we tried to make an unexpected character sort of way, but I don't know, I liked it. I thought she was a really good character. And I think she had a lot of growth throughout the book, really more of like a coming of age sort of story. And it reminded me a lot of one of my absolute favorite books of all time, probably my actual favorite non-fantasy book of all time, Just Saving Francesca. Has a similar vibe. We've got a young woman whose mother is unwell, feels like she needs to take care of the whole family. Very smart person in a sort of changed environment in some ways, and new people around her, new things happening, losing old friends, emotional found family, some romance thrown in, sort of thing. So I did liken it to that a little bit throughout the reading process, which probably made me feel like I liked it even more. But I do think that I really enjoyed this book. I was so surprised, like ridiculously surprised. Reading this book is why I've now decided that I'm going to do a book awards at the end of this year. I'm going to do a book award ceremony at the end of this year, and one of those categories is going to be the most surprising book, and it's probably going to be Check and Mate unless something else surprises me wildly. That was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, which I obviously really enjoyed, surprisingly. And I finished that one on the 17th of March. All right, next up we have High Fire by Owen Colfer. This is the same person that wrote Artemis Fowl series, if you are at all familiar with that. Another one that is on my TBR is the Artemis Fowl series, which we just bought the box set of. But this is his more adult fantasy novel. It's sort of like, I guess it's urban fantasy. I don't know the ruling on urban fantasy. Anyway, it's set in modern times. They have mobile phones, there's cities, there's electricity, all of that sort of stuff. But there is also dragons. We follow Squib, who is a young boy. He's like 13 or something. He's quite young, running around the swamps of Louisiana. He does a bunch of like little odd jobs for a lot of people around town. He works at the local bar. He does a few other things, and he ends up coming into contact with a dragon who lives out in the swamp. The dragon's name is Vern, who used to be Lord Highfire, hence the name. Vern is short for Wyvern, and that is what he goes by. And he just lives in the swamps of Louisiana, and Squib sort of becomes his little go-between between the real world and him, so ferrying all of his food and supplies and everything out to him, making sure he gets to keep his Netflix on. He is a very modern dragon. He talks, he speaks, he stands upright, he eats, drinks like regular people mostly. He watches Netflix. And yeah, there's a crooked constable who is out to get them. And this is them sort of Squib trying to hide what he's doing, Vern trying to hide his life, and then all of them trying to fight Hook at various points in time throughout the book. So that was High Fire. I didn't love it, but I thought it was a very solid book. I gave it 3 stars as well. There's a lot of 3 stars going on this month. Nothing was below 3 stars this month, so that's pretty good. I'll take it. And I finished reading that one on the 23rd of March. And finally, this is another library book which I must return, but we still have it at the moment. This is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is one of the books that I had to read as part of the Goodreads challenge. The actual Goodreads winner is the second book in this series, which is Hellbent, but of course I had to read the first book to be able to read the second book. But this is following our main character, Alex, actual name Galaxy, and she has a very sad past, a lot of drug usage / selling, and something really terrible happened before she came here and was given the opportunity to come to Yale. But she has arrived in Yale and she has joined Leith House, I haven't actually considered how you say that out loud. She has joined one of the kind of secret societies of Yale, but it is actually the secret society that is there to look after the other secret societies, because all of the secret societies actually have magic. And there's a bunch of ghosts and other various like supernatural elements going on. And yeah, they do some really creepy sort of magics, like Skull and Bones, which is sort of the main one that people know the name of. They do things like cut people open and look through their intestines to see the future of the stock market. Some of them have a drug that makes someone basically a servant to someone else, and they will do absolutely anything that they ask and are very happy to do it. Some of them have portal magic, some of them have weather magic. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Each secret society has their own sort of magic, and Leith House is there to make sure they're not doing things that they shouldn't. Obviously, things like Skull and Bones with their chopping people open used to kill a lot of people. A lot of people died in those rituals, unsurprisingly. Leith House was created to keep an eye on these things, make sure that their rituals and everything are not causing harm to real people and the world around them and the city that they live in. So yeah, she's joined Leith House. She has this rare ability to be able to see ghosts. She has someone who is supposed to be teaching her how to do all of these things, how to know what's right, what's wrong, how to protect these rituals and everything. But something happened to him. He has disappeared. We don't really know what. We're jumping back and forth between I think it's winter that they are in the middle of, where Alex's real world is happening, back to the previous, what they would call fall, what I would call autumn. And that is where we sort of get Darlington's perspective. He is the one that is supposed to be teaching her, and we see him teaching her throughout fall. But then somehow in winter, he's gone, and we don't really know what's happened to him. So we're trying to figure out that mystery. There is also a murder. There's a girl's just been murdered, and Alex, on her own, has to try to figure out not only what happened with the murder, but how she's supposed to handle the murder. There's murder mystery, there's disappearance mystery, there's supernatural elements, there's fantasy elements. There's just a whole bunch of intrigue. Like, what the hell is going on? There's a lot of like political issues and everything. Of the dean of the school, who used to be a Leith, he's an Leith alumni, doesn't want her to chase things because it's a funding year. So he's trying to make sure Alex doesn't ruffle too many feathers and get the funding taken away from Leith. Bunch of that sort of stuff going on. I, at one point, felt like I needed to get out the like cork board and start putting pins in things and lining up red tape trying to solve this mystery. There was so much going on, and I absolutely loved it. I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. All of the characters were amazing. I also have now set up a favorite character category for my end of year awards, and like the 3 main characters in this book all got put on the list. They're all potentials. And yeah, absolutely loved it. And I did finish that one on the 1st of April, so technically not in March, but we're counting it as being in March. Yeah, I really love this book. I'm so looking forward to reading the next book, which is great because it's going to happen within the next 2 months. And that is every book that I read in March of 2024. That explanation of that one book became very long, but I just really loved it. The other thing that I was going to do is we're going to have a look through all of the reading challenges that I am working on. So, first of all, I have the 2 that I have some physical stuff for. So we have the Dimmicks reading challenge, which ran from Jan to March. So this is now complete, and I did complete it, which is fantastic. I did have 2 left to do when I started March, so we've added 2 more. So we completed Local Flavour, which was to sample the local literary scene. Trying to read it backwards and it's not working. Sample the local literary scene and celebrate our talented Australian authors. #Read Australian, for which I read The Secret Runners of New York, as I mentioned, by Matthew Riley. And the other one that I read was I got Travel Bug. Indulge your inner wanderer with a book that whisks you away to a different time, place, or culture, which I put High Fire down for because it is very much focused on the Louisiana swamplands. So that was those 2. So I now have a complete roster if you want to I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you want to have a little bit of a read through yourself, pause the video of all of the things that I have read for my Dimmix reading challenge. The other one that I have a physical copy of is Adventures in Aldea. Adventures in Aldea, which is a reading challenge put on by another YouTuber, booktuber. I will try to remember to link to her videos in this, but if I do forget, it is in my previous videos. And yeah, this is just like a one book a month type situation. Got all the months down the side and some prompts in the middle. So for March, I had to cut my way through wild vines blocking an ancient exit. Book neither first nor last in the series. So that was A Court of Wings and Ruin. It's very small. As far as my March TBR is concerned, I read 4 out of the 6 books that were on my March TBR. I did read 6 books, it just wasn't the right 6 books. So the 2 that I missed were The Outsider and Jade City, which is unfortunate because I did actually buy Jade City and I was really looking forward to reading Jade City, but I didn't quite get there. And that was my book that was it's like a sci-fi book, I think was the prompt. But The Outsider, I've gotten The Outsider on my TBR in both February and March and still haven't read it, and it's also on my April TBR, but I have now started it. I started this last night and have read some more this morning. We're gonna read it. We're finally going to read it. I ended up just buying it because I was so sick of waiting for it to show up from the library. Promise that it will get read this month, unless I absolutely hate it and I DNF it. But we are going to be taking it off the TBR this month. Those are the 2 that I missed. I did read Secret Runners of New York, Ruthless Vows, High Fire, and Ninth House. And then, of course, I did also read Check and Mate as another of the Goodreads winners, but it wasn't actually on my TBR for that month. And finally, we have the QBD reading challenge for 2024, which I actually managed to get almost every book that I read onto this list. I think the only one that didn't get on there was ACOWAR. So we have Visit the Relatives, a book suggested by a loved one. I put High Fire. High Fire is actually a book that I have borrowed from my sister, so I think that definitely counts as being suggested by them. Then we have Staycation, a book by an Australian author. Of course, I used The Secret Runners of New York again. A Holiday Countdown, a book with a number in the title. I used Ninth House. Increase Your Spice Tolerance, a romance novel. I put Check and Mate. And New Arrival, a book published in 2024, we had Ruthless Vows. So yeah, that is everything that I read in March of 2024 and all of my reading challenge updates. I did just do my April TBR last month, so if you are curious what I'm going to be reading in April, you can check that out. I will link it up the top, at the end, wherever it so happens to go. It will be linked somewhere. And yeah, that's going to be it from me today. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll be back next week, probably with more booktube content. I don't actually know what's coming out next week, but we're going to find out. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. So yeah, I had something else I was going to say and now I've lost my train of thought. Do I have to look it up or do I just not care? Stuck in indecision. I'll look up. TV shirts. Oh, TV shirts? He has t-shirts. I don't know. We're going to cut this bit, so who cares?